course, make sure it's working on all the different things. Let me see.
All right.
Okay. We're good on Twitch, and then we should be all set on YouTube as well. Okay.
Yes.
Let's kick it off and wait here. And then people should be showing up, and we should be just fine. I'm going to retweet the Twitter thing. Cool. Okay. Okay, we should be good to go. I see it live. I think the notifications went out on Discord, which I can't see because we're using that to record. But we should be good, all good to go. Okay, how's it going? Nice to meet you, Cody. Of course, same skill. As we were saying beforehand, very familiar with Dollar Coins. He's in here all the fucking time, so love that guy. It is our first time meeting, of course, so I'm looking forward to hearing about it. I'm not super familiar with the indie kind of comic scene. I'm obviously familiar with Indiegogo and Kickstarter and all that stuff. So I love hearing about the business side of it. I know a couple of times. I don't know if you know Liam from Conquest Comics. I've talked to him a couple of times.
Oh, okay.
And so I know a little bit from like his work with Xenoverse and things like that. I've talked to him about that. And then I've obviously worked in like Barnes and Noble. I worked there for 7 years. So that is like my gist of knowing how the book industry and all that stuff works, as well as the manga and the indie comics and all that stuff. So I'm always interested to hear about it. I know you guys are 4 issues deep, right? So that's, I would say, pretty successful. Is each one of them an Indiegogo campaign, or did the first one come out beforehand?
So the first one, so I mean that's a crazy story, but the short story is I met the artist, produced the line art, right? Just I had an idea in my head forever that needed to get out. Over time, I of course wanted to share that, and so there's a lot of different avenues you try traditional publishing routes and pitching that went nowhere. Like 99.9% silence and like the 0.1% like this isn't what we published, but thank you for sharing with us. I enjoyed the read. And that was nice to get something. But after that, over time, like I finally was like, well, I'm not getting this out by just sheer luck, which was basically all I was giving it to, really. And so I'm like, okay, fine, I'll finally join social media. So I did the social media thing. I did try an Indiegogo campaign before going social media, and it was 60 days and $10. Did not fun. So issue 1's line art and like the writing and stuff that has been up on Tapastic for oh god, what is it now? Oh wow, 6 years probably at this point.
Damn.
And so during that, we just had the line art, and then I did some very poor lettering. A letterer found us, was like, I love the story, I love the art, please let me do the lettering.
Yeah.
Because my lettering is just terrible. I was like, I jumped into this as fresh-faced and ignorant as you can, just hoping I don't hit a rock on the way down in the dive, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't. But I definitely ended up in deep waters, and had to learn how to swim real quick. And so with that, part of it, again, was the social media. I joined Twitter, and it was during a time of like strong indie comics push.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and went with that. We had a quality product to show folks. Again, we had the issue up already, so folks could go and read it and see, if it was for them. People resonated with it, and I was able to run a campaign that was just for the line art for issue number 2. Again, I had I had plenty of interest in getting printing and all of that done, but I have stayed considerate and very humble on our goals, on what we need to do and what we're able to do. And so I didn't start with printing. I just wanted to do that line art. I just wanted to continue telling the story however I could. And with that crowdfunding campaign, so the first issue I funded out of pocket at a ridiculously low rate because of how I met this artist, and that whole journey meeting him was the heck of a tale. But since then, we've been able to build awareness. So we've ran a few campaigns. So far 2 have been successful, which was trying to get issue 2's line art, which became a print run for issue 1, and then coloring for both issues, and then of course a print run from issue 2 as well. That was the first campaign we ran, completely unorthodox. I don't think you're supposed to run a campaign like we did, but we did it and we
Yeah.
delivered, so no trouble there. And then we've run a couple other campaigns. One was for Cactus Coyote. We were going to do a more traditional
Nice.
Western adaptation for it,
Mhm.
and that got a little bit of steam, but it didn't fund. Then after that, we did issue number three's campaign, which was during a very crazy time for the world, and we still somehow in the last 2 days got about 40% of our 10K goal the last 2 days.
Dang.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was
Yeah,
one of the craziest
congratulations on
things.
that. That's insane.
Yeah, we did not expect that to happen, but it did, and we got that out, and so every step of the way, like that was the first time I personally had issue three stuff. First time I personally had dealt with a printer myself,
Yeah.
instead of my publisher dealing with it. It's the first time we offered metal cards. It was our biggest. We almost, I think we hit 460 some odd backers. All of the physical tiers of that had personally signed metal cards I had to send out to it, which
Wow.
was a lot of fun. First time I did a mass signing, right?
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I've learned every step of the way, and I've just been so blessed to be able to, because wonderful folks are interested in talking about the work, engaging with the
Yeah.
work, and supporting it. So, if folks are interested and you're listening and you're kind of curious, I'm gonna have a hard time explaining what Jack Irons is because it's a lot.
I was gonna say,
Um,
shoot it with
it's a
an elevator
lot.
pitch and see how it goes because
Okay,
it.
so I do have an elevator
Oh,
pitch.
okay. Let's hear
It's
it.
a it's a one-line elevator pitch. A reincarnated immortal seeks freedom and purpose in Galactic Armageddon. So I use a lot of big words.
Mhm,
Hopefully,
mhm.
still folks engage their imagination as fully as they can,
Yeah.
because that's what I'm trying to do with the work. And so if that interests you, go to IronVerseComics.com. You can read Cactus Coyote's manga for free off of
Mhm.
there, but you can also read Jack Irons issue number one. We've always had that a digital free option to dive into the work, because again, it's a very complex system that can be hard to pitch. But if folks have a couple minutes to check it out, look at our gorgeous artwork, and see what we're trying to build over at IronVerse Comics in general, I think they'll want in on it. And we're time's running out to get number four moving, and to get board for the previous three issues that are on there as well.
Yeah, I feel like comics is such a weird little spot too because it's such an old like industry. Like it's been around a very long time, but I feel like they're in the middle of trying to figure out some hardcore pivot. Like you were saying, indie comics went through a really big push like not that long ago,
Yes.
but now it's like Marvel, DC, all these people are trying to figure out like, do we go to a digital pushing? Do we do this? And I feel like obviously I'm super biased in this sense, and obviously I've seen it working at Barnes and Nobles. Manga is just sounding like
Oh,
hotcakes. Like
it's
manga
killing.
is
It's
just like the
killing it.
fucking hot sauce right now. It's just like it's
It's
going.
what I prefer to read right
Hmm.
now. Like if I'm picking up a modern a tale from a modern storyteller, it's
Yeah.
manga. Or it's an indie crowdfunding thing. Like I don't even buy indie from publishers very much. It's there's this disconnect between the creation aspect and the business aspect that exists on this higher end of the more mainstream end,
Yeah.
in Western production, period, art production. But let's talk about comics particularly. It's very strong,
Yeah.
and you either really resonate with the directions they're pulling, which is great, and I'm happy for you, or you really do not. There's no like middle ground where there's, well, here's a couple titles I really like,
Yeah.
that I'll keep buying ongoing. And also the competitive rates of buying a Tonkabon compared to buying a Western single
Yeah.
issue
Yeah.
floppy is just, I mean, it's night and day. I've always been a back issue guy, so that's not much of a problem. You go to the dollar bin and pick up a couple comics, right, from the 80s or 90s. But spending $5, $6, $7 on a 22-page floppy from maybe an IP you really like, that maybe you don't like the direction they're going, but you still want the IP to go,
Mhm.
is can be a hard sell. It can be a very hard sell compared to picking up a new ongoing manga where you know that like this is the creative team on it. This
Mhm.
is the storyteller you're going to have, and you can take that ride as long as you enjoy it. And it's going to be that ride. It's not going to be, well, here's a 12-issue miniseries. If you don't like that, well, we're doing a new number one next year.
Yeah,
It's,
that's
it's,
always been my
it's,
issue with comics because, like, obviously, like, growing up, I've always loved Batman. Like, that's the most easiest one to get into. Love Batman. Batman the Animated Series was coming out when I was much younger. Loved that. But it's like it
yes.
comes to a point where, like, with manga, I like that I can follow the one route all the way through. You know, it's like I got the
Oh,
one series, the one storyline. This is it. But then, alternatively, I do like with comics, they do have the opportunity to be like, hey, what if this happened? Like, that's how you get stuff where, like, for me, I always thought Injustice was really cool. It's like you get the
yeah.
Injustice line where it's like, hey, what if this? Or like Superman Red Sun, like, same thing. Where they're like, hey, let's just go a little crazy. And it's like, they don't ever really do that with manga. Like, you don't ever get kind of a what if like this is how it went on. They're just like, yeah, this is the storyline. You're stuck to that, but it's like it's gonna be good. But all of those little what if scenarios you wish could have seen you could have happened, not really gonna see it. But I still think manga in the long run is good, and it's a bit of a different one because I feel like comics make so much. I don't know. I'm so much more money with like their little variant issues and things like that, which is not something you see very often in manga.
Couple.
Yeah,
they definitely have different business tricks. And,
yeah,
and that's the other thing too, is that comics was able to synergize with the toy market and the collecting market, whereas manga has synergized with animation, but with toys and with statues and such, but they didn't synergize with the collector's market.
Yeah,
maybe for figures, sure, if it's like
sure.
a series you really enjoy, but not for like the actual physical issues. I doubt people pick up say the Shonen Jump collected version and then later they pick up the trade, maybe. But that's it, right? There's not like a variant of that Shonen Jump that they also pick up. There's not a variant of that that they also pick up just to have as a collector's thing. No, they're selling you the story, whereas a lot of Western, they're selling you the experience, the lifestyle, as it were. And for better or worse, as an indie comic creator, right, I use every tool available in the kit, right? If you don't, you're wasting your time. You're yelling at a wall anyway, so make it a very loud yell. It's there's certain practices and such that I really appreciate. Again, I would love to. I try and approach the storytelling. That's why I think I synergize so well with Dollar Coins.
Yeah.
In a longer form, more manga type of storytelling, where you're focused on this very specific journey, and you're not going to be pivoting or wasting time in very many single kind of ideas. You're working on and hacking away at one grand idea, whereas we are still presenting it in the floppies. They're fatter floppies. They're 48-page floppies, but they are still floppies. So it's and we still do. For Dollar Coins on the Western adaptation, the Ashcan, which is available with issue number 4 digitally, which is really neat for the first time, and he's been working on that for years now, and it's great to see it like come to fruition. Besides his wonderful manga, which again people can read right now. Great.
We've read and reviewed it before. We have we have Cactus Coyote t-shirt. We have multiple mugs. We have plenty of Cactus Coyote in the house. So I definitely recommend checking it out. And the link to it is in the description for the Indiegogo campaign. If anybody watching wants to check it out, for sure, just click the link in the description. It takes you right there. So I have a question from the audience. Retsum is in here, one of my longtime viewers. I see Dollar Coins tackling it a little bit. Retsum wants to know, isn't it extremely hard to reach a big audience if you start just with comics? Because obviously, like, a lot of it is the digital age now. So he asked, wouldn't it be better to build a small community on a site like, let's say, Reddit? Or, like, even I would say, like, what about, like, a webtoon sort of adaptation? I feel like that is also the next kind of, like, hot, big thing.
I can answer that in a couple ways. So web comics, depending on the format you're trying to nail, like, they are a different format than comics. They're presented differently. They are built differently in terms of layout, in terms of the stories they can tell. Long ongoing stories in webcomics don't tend to hit as much as like event of the week ongoing, right? That's not the kind of story we needed to tell over at IronVerse, but that is something that can be done. I've seen different projects do both. I've seen plenty of folks have their cake and eat it too. They use webcomics as a additional way to keep folks who maybe can't afford to jump in on their main hardcover nice book releases on GoGo and such, but they can still engage with the community. They can engage each week and get a new page or two from this webcomic series, which is more like lifestyle or dealing with like certain personality traits or just a funny idea they had that week that wouldn't fit in the main work, but does very much fit the brand, right? And so that's one way. I have seen some folks be successful with long format storytelling in webcomics, but it's a much harder hill to climb than doing that long format storytelling in regular comics. The readers of comics and manga tend to appreciate that longer format, and so you got to kind of pivot towards where they're at. Comic readers and webcomic readers, there's of course overlap, but not as much as folks would think or hope. And so it's different audiences, and so it's smart to engage both. But I think it's very hard to have your cake and eat it too with the same product.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that, and I feel like now it is so like that's kind of the route people are expecting. I don't even know how you would go about getting the traditional route anymore. Like, how would you even go into getting that? But I feel like it's so obvious to me seeing it now, where it's like just start putting your stuff out online and just like moving from square one and doing that sort of thing. And that leads me to another question, which I can't even fathom. Okay, because like I'm going to call myself a self-proclaimed boomer here. I look at something like Twitter, and I'm like, I have no fucking idea how you would grow on Twitter. I have zero idea.
I don't know how I did it.
I get the hashtags, I get that stuff, but man, that
doesn't work.
Like, I feel like people don't browse hashtags on Twitter. Like, that makes no sense. So that also leads me to something like if you're starting a small comic, let's say like you go back to, Jack Irons Volume 1, how do you get people to read into this new comic book series that is like nobody's ever heard of, nobody's ever seen? Like, how do you get people to get into that? You just put it out there and hope for the best?
That's the first step no matter what, but that won't do it. It never will. There's so much content. Like, if you dive into indie comics, there are thousands upon thousands that are excellent but get no traction. It's crazy. Comics is a field that folks feel is accessible, and they can be professional. It feels like an accessible dream is the best way I can put it. And so there's so many people doing it, especially in the last couple years when things have gotten a little crazy. People are feeling like now's the time. And so I got started in 2018, and I jumped on Twitter, and I had found folks looking for indie comics, and I presented them with a quality product. That's timing, as well as how I presented myself and what the people were looking for, right? That's not for everybody, and it's not going to work for everybody. I've continued to grow because I haven't changed that footing, but I've also continued to pivot outside of my box and support others. That's a big one. Is most comic fans that I found are also either comic creators or have a desire to be a comic creator or have that feeling of that accessible dream. So that's why they support the industry in their own way. And so if they see folks who are networking and positively supporting the community, whatever community that is, they're more likely to support that, because not only are they investing in that person, but maybe they're investing in their own future growth, etc. And so it's a tough one, right? Like Facebook, I never understood, yet I've seen a lot of people who are really good at working that at social media, especially for comics, indie comics in particular. And I've seen folks who are really good at the Reddit end of it. I don't understand that either. Twitter I understand because it's very quick, very, very precise, and I can get it done with, like, I'm very ADD, so I don't have to focus too hard on it. I just have to pull it off correctly in the moment, and then we're good. Instagram's another one I don't understand. In fact, I wouldn't have one without dollar coins kind of setting it up, and I was like, okay, and now I can post on PC, so now I'll use it. Before I wouldn't even, because I would have to have it on the phone, and then have to transfer stuff from PC to the phone to post it, and it's just nightmare. Eventually, I put up our own site, of course, through Shopify, so we can sell print-on-demand merch and just other things that's there, so people can engage with the IP, and it was just a good hub so that they can find every social media site that we're on and all of that. I think that helps. It's also not like it would be the silver bullet if you can get folks to move off of their other stuff to engage with your work solely on that platform. And I've seen some successful people have that platform, but I haven't seen anybody super successful, like even folks like Brian Polito with Coffin Comics and stuff. The infrastructure is totally there to completely pivot off of these crowdfunding sites and off of these social media sites and straight to your own infrastructure, which would cut out middlemen. It would cut out a lot of things and be excellent. But that transition is, from what I've seen, nearly impossible. And so it's just, again, it's another tool, but it's building that fan base is just time, luck, consistency, and quality. I guess it's the best I could say.
Yeah, I've seen that thing talked about before, even with stuff like TikTok. I feel like comes up a lot because obviously that is super hot right now. But one of the things they talk about with TikTok is it's incredibly super hard to get people to come off of TikTok because it's own little app, and like they have got everybody so ingrained into being on this little app and not wanting to leave that like it's very hard to get big on TikTok, one, but then it's also very hard to get anybody to want to come off of TikTok, because I know for like YouTube, for like what we do here, a big part of it is like they always say, listen, YouTube's great, like love it, but you never know, like YouTube's a big corporate company. They could decide, one day to just erase you like a bug, and it could be for whatever reason. It's happened to us twice already. So they could, for whatever reason, just take you out. But then that's why they always say, it's like you want to have people on the YouTube or like whatever site you're on, but you want to have your own site, like you were saying, like IronVerse.com or like you guys' website that you have, it's like that's where you want to keep the people. Like that's where you want them to come checking out and doing their thing. So it's always very interesting when you see the Reddit successes or like the Facebook successes, and then you try to see how they try to pivot off of that. So I always thought that was really good. Redsum is hitting back with another question: is how do you go about keeping readers? You know, because obviously he's saying that readers jump from one story to another story without staying really for the long ride. Do you notice that being a thing, or are people pretty consistent for sticking? Like, what is the retention that you guys have from project to project?
Oh, for digital content, it's been very consistent. For this, from the previous project to this one, so from issue number 3 of Jack to issue number 4, that had a huge drop in support, a massive drop, and I think that was financial. I think over the pandemic, everybody's been hit in one way or another.
Yeah.
And so I've put up polls, and that's been consistently the answer. It's just like I just can't right now. And so retaining readers, the quality, of course, is part of it. The personality, right? A lot of people for crowdfunding, they invest in you. That's part of it. Like they get this product as well, and they get to see the journey. They get all that wonderful stuff, but it's because they want to see you succeed for whatever reason that you've communicated to them, right? And so I think in that game, it's a lot easier to keep that retention, because if they wanted you to succeed then and you haven't done anything crazy or anything terribly wrong or disrespectful in between then that feeling isn't going to change. Whereas if you're just like picking a comic off a shelf, and like you didn't really love that issue, you might not pick up the next one, and you don't have any investment in it besides that story. And so that's definitely much harder to keep that readership. And so yeah, that's a tough one. Like consistency. If we were able to put out a book every 2 months, our readership would have grown like crazy. I've seen folks who are able to put it out like at least one hardcover, 64 pages or something every quarter, and that has seen exceed crazy growth. Both domestically and in Japan, because they were targeting Western comic fans in Japan, folks who are interested in that spectrum, because they do something that's kind of an Amerimanga kind of style to it. And so that's been crazy to see, but again, it's just the consistency. I've seen that grow crazy, and then and that one's off of the product more than the personality. But I've seen people make millions of dollars off of primarily the personality, and then they don't deliver the book for years.
Yeah.
So it's different for everybody. For our work, again, it's for me, it's super important. What the story we're telling is super important to me. It was when I came up with it about 16 years ago, and it's important still. It hasn't changed. It's something we all deal with. Most of it is authoritarian structuring, but it's a lot of just human experience, right? And it's a communication of my own bits and pieces of that, and trying to communicate it to a wider audience. And so that for me, it's just like I'm all in on it. So I'm going to be consistent with trying to get it done. Being consistent on succeeding on that's a different story, and we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing across the board that you constantly talk about. Is like people always say, "Hey, consistency." It's like it's the same thing that is constantly said every time, because like you think of like for a digital age, even with stuff where you see stuff trending on Twitter, trending on Instagram, whatever, it's like people's memory is short. It is so short. So it's like if you disappear, people can forget. It's like it's like you give it a couple of months, you give it a year, people are gonna just kick you out of their brain. Like they're not gonna remember it at all. So I mean, I feel like consistency is key. I always try to think the same thing about over here. But with consistency, have you ever thought about doing some sort of a digital model? Because like an example, I think of something like obviously Comixology is really big now. I think something like Shonen Jump has put all of their stuff up for free, or like basically free. I think it's like $2.99 a month, and you get their whole collection of everything. Obviously, I think that has become a big thing to fight off pirates, because it's like, hey, if you're not going to put it up, someone else is going to, so you might as well do it. Have you ever thought of doing something like that for more consistency?
Yeah, the problem is, so we work, if you look at our campaign goal, we work at technically above a professional page rate for our folks. We take care of our folks. And so had I had some kind of stash, some kind of weight behind me, absolutely. I could do a page a week or something like that, right? I could fund that. But that's not what we do. That's not it's just not possible. But pivoting to more of a webcomic format for maybe a different series or different idea. Absolutely. Right now, where you'll read issue number 1, if you read it off our site, is a hosting site called Global Comics. They have kind of exploded on the scene the last 2 years. Jack's been the most popular comic on their site for about a year and a half. I mean, they have publishers like Heavy Metal, Top Cow, quite a few of those indie mid-range indie publishers on there, so that's kind of been neat. They do great analytics. The CEO is super communicative and great with bug fixes and such. He does it himself. So like I've been slightly partnered with them for a while, and that's been a wonderful experience. But to put the product out consistently, it's funding. Funding's the only barrier, right? If I was an artist myself, then I could tick away at it, right? I could consistently do it myself and see what happens just by investing my skill and effort. But I'm not, and I couldn't do it with prose, right? Like most folks don't want to read a short story a week. They might, but not like to the engagement of a webcomic or such. And so, absolutely, I would, but it's the same barrier that stops us from doing what we've already done a few times, right? So.
Okay. Well, I always find it really interesting what distribution model people like to go with. I love hearing the business side of that kind of stuff. My boy Gabe in chat wants to know, how do you go about getting ideas and a concept for any sort of product like media, whether like comics, art, like, new manga series? What is like step one into making something new? Like, do you have some sort of secret way, or just personal experiences? How do you go about it?
Personal experience would kind of say it, but like it's for Jack in particular, it was the growing awareness of the human experience and human history being learned by a young adult, moving from childhood and the ignorance and bliss of simply being alive to understanding what that truly means, to in many different aspects. And so Jack was a manifestation of me just trying to work that out, and eventually another life change happened, and I had to share and produce this thing and get it moving for furthering my own personal development. And so that's how I did it. I recommend finding something that means quite a bit to you and working from that. But some folks, it's just like, oh, this will be fun, right? A lot of folks can work straight from that and have great success with it. So there's a million ways to get those ideas, but it has to be something you are willing to stand behind for a chunk of time, whatever that is. If it's a one-shot comic, it's not gonna, it's still like a year of effort. It could be, so it's gotta be something that you are willing to not waver on. It's something that you have to will into existence. So it's got to be something that means enough in one form or another to you to make that happen. And so you kind of gotta soul search a little bit, would be my guess. Just soul search a little bit and find something. It doesn't have to be deep or meaningful. Again, it could be just, oh, this sounds really fun to me and I don't see it out there. I want to see it out there. It could be that simple. That would be the best way. And then of course, from that, right, that's almost just the ignition point. Then from that, most folks, I did in particular, you look at what resonated with you, what media and art has resonated with you, and find the aspects you like of that, and not directly copy or anything, but emulate and try and put your twists on and feel it out and homage and grow from these previous pillars that inspired you. And hopefully your idea will grow from there.
Very interesting, man. Like I said, I love, this is the most boomer answer ever, but I love watching Shark Tank, and I love hearing like people's like how they figure it out, how the business gets started. Retsum, related to what you just said, is in the chat, still just swinging away. Is there anything unique left to create in the comic industry, or has everything been created that every story, setting, plot, character, etc., somehow plagiarized quotes on that? So,
I mean, so there's only a handful of true like point A, point B, and so on stories to exist, right? There's a limit. There's infinite variations on those stories, but there's a limit to what they really are, and that's storytelling in general, human experience in general. We know we were born, we live, we die, right? And most stories fall in that pattern one way or another, and so it's hard to escape that. But there is infinite possibility for variation and unique expression within those lines. I don't think everything's plagiarized. You have to define plagiarism. Directly, I think very little art is directly plagiarized, especially art that actually makes an impact. I think a lot, the art that did the plagiarization makes an impact.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah.
mean. A lot of art will be plagiarized, and what came from that plagiarization doesn't make an impact.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think most of that is, a lot of it is simply variations on a theme. A classic one that falls in line with our stuff is when we took Kurosawa films and and adapted them to spaghetti westerns. Right?
Mhm.
It's literally, it can almost be shot for shot in some cases, but it became its own spirit of that work without diminishing the others, and it inspired its own branch of work that completely different and completely new from that. But that ignition point was again something that somebody came across and really enjoyed.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say everything's been done, because I don't believe everything's been done. I think there's some mad genius out there that'll come up with something new every day. But
Yeah.
um, I do think that, yeah, it's very hard not to have some homage, some emulation, some love of what you've come across in your own personal history, not make it into your work. I think that's very, very.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think the most sincere form of what is it? Flattery is imitation. It is
Yes.
what it is, and
Yes.
it's like with all things like that, you can see the clear hands, the clear things. Like I know Dollar Coins has been watching and says you enjoy Elden Ring is one of them as well. There's references out
Yes.
the wazoo in that game. It's like you
Yes.
could just tell easily what they really love. And as far as some like for Jack Irons, like what is it that kind of like inspired that series for you? So I know you said like Kurosawa films is like up there. Is there anything else you kind of base that off of? Like you want to try to pay homage to?
So, yeah, Jack, IronVerse Comics overall, but Jack specifically was, again, it's a lot of caricatures. The Four Horsemen are big caricatures of ideas that we all kind of face and deal with as humans.
Mm-hmm.
Jack himself is kind of a big idea of humanity. And so that one was easy, but for me, like Gendy Tartakovsky, specifically Samurai Jack,
Love
I
it.
didn't
Love it.
just choose Jack
Mm-hmm.
because of that. I chose Jack also because of the folklore, Western folklore kind of
Mm-hmm.
feel behind that name. It's a very old kind of trickster kind of name to it, and I wanted that feeling too. But it was, again, Samurai Jack is an individual trained by many different cultures to face one great evil they all face. Jack is a individual who has lived many different lives in many different cultures, facing four great evils.
Okay.
They're very close in terms of the general idea behind the journey, but they're very different in the expressions of it. That one's massive. Of course, spaghetti westerns, the game trilogy, Gunsmoke has become a big one. Trigun
Love
was of
Trigun.
course an
Mm-hmm.
influence. Cowboy Bebop for mood
Mm-hmm.
and storytelling was a big influence. Full Metal Alchemist for a little bit. She was able to hit the notes and the emotional depth she's able to hit in that, while balancing it with a little bit of levity and wonderful characterization and tackling these deep topics in a manageable way. Just incredible. That was a massive influence. Uh, uh, it continues to grow as I live and
Yeah.
learn and read. Right, so it continues each issue. In particular, this issue, I based the plot line off of two things: a little bit of Dante's Inferno as we dive through different layers of this hell, and basically, I swiped the story, the plot from the Four Sights of the Buddha. Siddhartha's awakening to the life and existence outside of the palace, which really very much fits what happens to Jack at the end of 3 and what's happening to him now as he's kind of knocked out of his apathetic stupor in the
Yeah.
first arc from 1 through 3. And so, you take it from where you want to. They're all, again, tools. They're all just tools in your kit, and you just try and make the best, most expressive thing you can from deep within. In my case, and tell a story that hopefully will resonate with folks that hasn't been told in this way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, so Samurai Jackson, that one's probably the most direct that you can go to, because again,
Yeah.
it's also a fish out of water in terms of time. Tale as well, with Jack being, of course, he's been reincarnated, so he has a bunch of these other lives, but then he got stuck as an immortal, and so now he's doesn't even know what cycle he's a part of anymore, so he's got this disconnect from everything. Jack, it was a disconnect from the cultures and world and aliens and everything around him. Samurai Jack, so it's that's the closest, like, big direct inspiration.
Okay.
Tarkovsky's work there. But
Yeah.
there's some Ralph Bakshi we've worked with. There's a whole bunch of different folks.
Okay. I mean, with that, I dig so many of the shows that you just listed. They're so good.
Yeah.
So, with that, what are you digging right now? Any new shows? Any new series? Anime? Manga? What are you digging right now?
So I've been since they finally released an affordable, like not old version of Fist of the North Star. I've been collecting those
Oh, I
hardcovers
have
that they
never
came out.
seen that, and I hear nothing but fantastic things about it. So,
It's the ultimate power fantasy. You know, Kenshiro's never going to lose any of these fights, and they take a big like bit of making these really. It's a manga version of the Punisher in a lot of ways, just taken from a more Eastern spiritual standpoint instead of a Western military standpoint. And so I was a huge Punisher fan. Again, if we're getting into like comics, Ghost Rider: Road to Damnation was a mini series by Garth Ennis and Clayton Crane, and Clayton Crane's art is what got me to want to make comics.
oh wow, okay.
He does this beautiful digital artwork when that was kind of new, and so how he was able to affect lighting and fire and style and render these motorcycles and a flaming skull on fire and a leather jacket. Man, I was hooked. I was hooked as a teen. I was like, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen. And Ennis has been a big thing. His sense of humor while dealing with these dark topics has always kind of resonated with me. When I read through Punisher Max, how he was able to give Frank a dry sense of humor and deal with these absolute horror shows that are real, and make them feel something that at least one man with a gun could deal with, right? That always interested me, and that's the same thing with like a spaghetti western. That's the same kind of tale with one man with a gun walks in and solves the town's problems and then walks out. And same samurai film, same kind of thing. The Ronin walks in, solves town problems, walks out. That journey's always been a very interesting one.
Okay. Yeah, I dig it. It's like, I mean, I feel like westerns have come back into style all of a sudden, and I'm obviously thinking something like Mandalorian is like, I feel like was a big push behind that. It just has been incredible, and even stuff you would say like Logan. You know, like I feel like Logan was such a western. It was just like, you know, old man, little person is like, oh, okay, I dig it. So it's like I always like hearing about that. With something like Indiegogo or like a Kickstarter campaign, like, you know, obviously, you know how to make comics. You know how to like write them. You know how to draw them. Like that's a pretty straightforward path. How do you go about then from getting them to be published into like an actual physical format? Because that seems like a big leap for me.
So my first thing, again, I ran that campaign just to get the digital art. So my first bit with publishing, of course, was publishing on a digital hosting platform. That's easy. You just sign
like that seems straightforward to me, but I would not. I feel like going from digital to physical is like a whole other foreign land.
It is, and so during that campaign, not only did I meet a bunch of new team members, our new letterer, colorist, who set the tone for Jack, but then had to leave between 1 and 2 because he had a family to support, and the companies he was working for, which was like Boom and IDW, they weren't paying enough to actually feed it, so he went back to his corporate job. So we had to find a new colorist between 1 and 2, and Stephen Cannon just stepped into that, and since there was so many years between the line art of issue 1 and the line art of issue number 2, it was just this nice evolution, and people can see that if they check out 1 and 2 on Global Comics, or go ahead and purchase them off Wicked Publishing. There's a lot of ways to get a hold of our books right now, but that campaign attracted a publisher who's like, oh, we can take care of this. We've done this before, and so that's how I dove in with 1 and 2. But with issue number 3, I wanted to have that aspect. I wanted to figure that out, so I knew every part of making this thing happen. And so I found a wonderful printer and an incredible liaison in there who the best kind of middleman, right? Like, he's working for this other company, but you can tell he just wants it to be the best for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Instead of working to just better the company. That was, that's very rare, and it's a blessing if you find that. Stick with it. So that allowed me to figure that out and do it. So a lot of it's just like staying on top of things, making sure the gears are moving in terms of people or product, getting on top of any errors that come on, because figuring out like even just the basic like certain type of coloring that needs to be used for different printers, those little things. Like, I work with artists, eventually I'm going to be able to ask somebody. But and as long as you're humble and willing to learn, people usually are willing to share that knowledge, especially if there's no like negative to them sharing it. It's just like, I'm helping this guy out, right on. And so that's, I mean, I just got in and did the work. That's the best way to figure out like anything. But with the physical publishing, it's kind of that simple as well. You just got to research what kind of printers you want to work with, figure out what their formattings are. The best case is you get in contact with somebody directly there who's going to help you, and then you're just dealing with a person and trying to make something happen. And that, I think, is something all of us have to do in our lives multiple times. So it's something most people can figure out. And so that's the bit. Like, it's not that much worse. The thing that we've had trouble with, which isn't fulfillment, which is a type of distribution, you know, you're sending them out to the customers, but actual the mechanical corporate mechanisms to getting things in shops and stores.
Oh.
That nut is nearly impossible to crack unless you're getting into the wider industry, and I think that's on purpose. I mean, you can maybe get into brick and mortar stores the way Jeff Smith's Bone did back in the day, where he called everybody up and like, here is my book, I will send you a sample.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, there's thousands of comic shops at that point instead of, God, I think we're at hundreds at this point. So I mean, it's doable if you put in the work, but if you're trying to do it through the main mechanisms like Diamond or Lunark or any of these other companies, they have a very rigid, like, system that you better be able to jump through, and you have to meet their standards. And even still, like YouTube, they can just say, no, you're done, we're not going to do that. And so you got to figure it out your own way, and that's a nut we're still trying to crack. That's a nut we're still trying to crack, because I think if you saw a Jack Floppy next to a lot of these modern books, I think it would stand out incredibly.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah, and even from just seeing that stuff, like, obviously seeing how the books come into the store, because, like, when I was working at Barnes & Noble, it's like I did the receiving, like, for that whole store. Like, I brought it in, I saw how that came in, I say how it all came out, and it's like, there's times where it's like, if they sit on the shelf and it's not selling, they'll just call that shit back. It's like, they'll just be like, all right, give it back to us, like, we don't want it anymore. And then it's like, they just send it back off the shelves, and then it's done. It's like, it's over. It doesn't come back in, it doesn't go back anything. They're just like, hey, mark this, send it out. And so, like, that is rough. That is really rough. That's why I feel like so much, you know, merch, like, even just random, it could be a random, like, I don't know, piece of toilet paper or something. It's almost always direct to consumer now, because it's like, why deal with, like, the brick and mortar? It's like, why go through the process of doing that when it's like, you have to share a cut with someone, and then you're now beholden to, hey, if they don't want it there, they're gonna fucking kick it out. It's like, sorry. So that stuff is, like, tough. I understand, like, why you almost never see too much new blood hit the shelves, where meanwhile, I feel like in the alternative universe, manga has so much random crap that makes it onto the shelf. Just like, they just take everything. They're just like, yeah, bring it in, because it'll just sell. And then obviously, like, manhwa, like the Korean mangas, are just doing crazy. Like, Solo Leveling has just been nuts. That they got an official printed version of it now, full color. Like, I don't know if you've got to hold that in your hand. It is heavy because it is all full color, so many pages, and it's crazy that they got that printed. But it sells like crazy. It's just It's insane. Like, the two inverse, where comic is very set in stone. They're like, yeah, listen, we got our heavy hitters. We know what's gonna sell. We're not gonna fuck around. It's like, we're bringing whatever Star Wars you want.
I mean, when they had a month, I think this year, where they put 50 Batman titles out 1 month.
Seriously?
Batman title.
Jeez.
Yeah, Batman is now about 70% of DC's line.
No shit.
When you're saying they're not screwing around, you kind of got to. Their definition's a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's how they've been dealing with this, and dealing with comic shops, and dealing with readers, and dealing with storylines and storytelling. With manga, there's a lot of ride or die. You either are making your blood and you're gaining a readership, or you're out. You better try something new that will. Like, if you want to come back.
Yeah.
This case, no. It's like, well, we know these writers. We like working with them. If we can sell 100,000 copies, great. We're not selling the millions that we did in the 90s for the collector's boom. We're not selling these millions. We're not expecting to. So let's hire the talent we want to work with and put their work out on the shelves, whatever that is. Which is very different than the manga. Like, we're training, you're working in an assistance kind of mentorship kind of setup, and you're working yourself sometimes to death.
Yeah.
It's neither one's good, but there's definitely something that they each could learn from each other that I don't think is going to happen on a mainstream level.
Yeah.
I think it's impossible for, like, indie folks these days to ignore how manga approaches things, and I think eventually it will become very hard for manga to ignore how independent sequential art, webcomics, all of these kind of ways to do it yourself are doing things. And eventually, like you saw, Shonen Jump finally put out that app, and they're like, well, we're going to put it out dirt cheap, so there's no reason to pirate, and so that anybody can become a Shonen Jump reader and dive into the massive category of One Piece or whatever you want to dive in, and you're hooked. I think that was a great adaptation, and that was one of those recognizing the times are changing instead of just trying to sell you those tankobons again and again. And so I think that was great. I know DC's actually has tried to put out a Batman webtoon, of course.
Oh, really?
I don't know how that's doing. Yeah, I don't know how that's doing. No idea how it's doing.
Okay.
But it was slice of life. They tried to hit that market. So I have no idea how that's doing, but I know it hasn't exploded, or else I would have never heard the end of it, right? So it's they're so rigid because it's been the same folks for the last 30 or 40 years at the top for everybody. So they're very rigid on like, okay, we'll take new talent and then see if they work, and then if they do, we're going to hold on to them for a while. The 90s also terrified, the image revolution just terrified the big two, just terrified them of making anybody like super popular.
Yeah.
Making any in particular super popular, because artists have that power to create from nothing by themselves in this medium, whereas writers, they're happy to give the power because they have a lot harder time making those things happen on their own. And so we've seen that there's been very few there's amazing talents at the big two, but like none of them have hit superstar status like Todd McFarlane or Liefeld, Jim Lee, because they kind of make sure that it doesn't happen anymore.
That's crazy.
For consistency, right? So they don't have to worry about this revolution. They don't have to worry about these folks leaving. They're just like, well, we can count on this money coming in, this IP still being alive, and we'll make our money. In particular, Marvel will make, Marvel publishing, not so much, but Marvel as an IP will make our money on the movies, right? And as long as we're still putting out comics, we're kind of keeping those IPs alive in a different way, and maybe we'll get a screenwriter out of it, or we'll get a new idea eventually, but that doesn't matter. Whereas manga, it's like, no, we want the manga industry to succeed because that helps the anime industry succeed. And if the anime industry succeeds, then the manga industry succeeds, and it keeps going. And it's just different. It's just so very different, and neither of them are great, but they get the job done in their own way. It's just, I do indie because I have a story that couldn't be published by those folks that needs to be told, and I want to tell it. And you know what? It could exist from a manga publisher. To be fair, it's a crazy enough idea that they might go for it. Yeah. But definitely not the Western scene. I couldn't. I don't even think Image, even at the level we're at, would even want to look at it. And it's a trip. It's a trip, but. I mean, it's been a wonderful journey to figure this all out, and I know again, the physical publishing bit. Like again, these folks with all these crowdfunding, they paid to give me an education in this business. That was like a good chunk of what they paid for, and so far I think I've done a good job honoring that and figuring it out. But it really is just a trip. It's like building your own YouTube channel, as you folks are doing, building all of these independent bits, because that is where human art right now is leaning. We love the mainstream stuff. We love our comfort food, but at the end of the day, each of us individuals have something we want to express that usually, it could maybe succeed in those channels, but it's going to be watered down in one form or another. And so we seek this independent bit, and as people produce it more, hopefully more people are attracted to that less prestigious, I guess, form of expression.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, because I think of stuff like, even I feel like Marvel or even DC. I guess more so DC. They've been very open recently doing like teen novels. I don't know if you've seen those coming, where they have the spin-offs like Catwoman, Batman, like in high school, or same thing like they have the Raven and Beast Boy like love romance novel that have just been doing incredible. They've just been doing like so well that they have just figured out like, hey, we pivot these stories a little bit. It's like people love them. It's like they know what's up. But it's like, I feel like something like I think of the latest, what I think of as a failure in the manga industry is Kishimoto doing Samurai 8. Did you ever read his new series, the Naruto author? No. He did another series after that called Samurai 8. It lasted for 4 volumes before they shut that down. They were like, nope, that's done. And they sent his ass back to Boruto. They're like, go back over there.
They wouldn't do that in the West. They just put him on another title, sure, but that would have been a 12-issue mini to begin with, and it might not have even gotten to issue 12, and they would have just like, well, now you're back on Hulk.
That's why I was so interested. It was like when it came out and I heard that like, hey, 4th volume, or I don't even know if it's 5. It's like, hey, this is gonna be the final one. I was like, no way they did that to the Naruto guy. Like, then that's huge. I was like, let me check and see what that's out, and you could see it was okay, but it had its little roots. It was trying to go somewhere, just move a little slow. And it just never even had the opportunity. They were just like, nope. was like, oh, okay, dang. And it's like, because they care, I feel like, readership, because they're on that weekly basis. They have those readership numbers like instantly, and they have the polls. They know what's up, and they're like, hey, if that's not cutting it, you're done. And it's like it's crazy. They don't even get a chance to pivot, but it's like they are also much more open. I don't know if it's just more cutthroat, but like you were saying, like manga is much more open to like ideas, like Jack Irons, things like that, where it's like they're like, yeah, fuck it. It's like we'll throw it in there. It's like we'll see what happens.
If
And
it does, it's sink or swim. If it doesn't swim, well, we can just get somebody else to pour their lifeblood into something. So that's a bit, right? Again, as you said, it was more cutthroat, I think, too. I couldn't imagine. I mean, you watch films of Tezuka on a way to an airport. He's drawing, and he hands off the page to the editor, and then he gets on the plane and he's drawing. You know, that kind of. Yora working himself to death there for a good chunk of time, and then he took a breather and then left. It's just so insane. I mean, we get beautiful artwork out of it. We get incredible expression out of it, but that is also just no way to live as a person.
Yeah.
So it's that balance, right? And you will not see Marvel artists working that hard for a deadline. They'll push the deadline at the end. They'll push, or they'll fire you, but they won't like they won't expect that level of dedication to prove that you're going to get it done.
Yeah.
And so I think that dedication is wonderful, but it's deadly, and so it's not great. It's not great.
Yeah, oh, for sure. The work that, I don't know, the dedication they have to just work themselves to the grave is just insane. So that's always something. I mean, man, anything else you want to say? Is there like if you could go back, like when you're just starting, is there any sort of advice you would give to people who are trying to get into the indie comic phase now?
So the main advice that pissed me off.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead. Let's hear
I was looking for like, how do you get into comics, right? Like I have a script written, which was nice. First thing I found out is there's not really a set format for comic scripts. That was one of the things that like invited me into comics. I did like plays and short stories and things before, and I looked at comics. I looked how they were set up. I was like, wonder how these are written. And then you look at different scripts. You look at an Alan Moore script, and then you look at like, oh god, I can't even give a different example right now. But Alan Moore will write you a novel for the artist, and a lot of folks, I mean, it's like 3 lines. It's just like panel. This is what's in the panel. This is what the dude's saying. And so when I found like, oh, I could do whatever I want here as long as it's communicating to the artist, and we can mutually kind of figure out what the page comes out like, then it's good. And that's what I loved about comics. But during that process, like how do you get into this? How do you do it? And the only way to do it is to make them. And that'll piss off a lot of people. Like, again, it was like, well, there's no path. There's no like, you can go for an art degree, I guess, but that still doesn't give you a path into the industry. There is no real path into the industry. Like if you even look at how a lot of people who are in the big 2 now got through, is they made indie comics. They got published by Image or Dark Horse or somebody smaller that got enough notoriety. They met the right people at cons, and then they got their little tentative mini series with Daredevil or whatever, and then they're working there. So like again, it's just make comics. I'm also going to qualify too is the cutthroat world of cartooning, which is kind of in between web comics and comic telling, and that one is insanity. I don't know. I respect cartoonists so very much because it is a daily grind for a lot of them, for 4 panels a day.
Yeah.
And like there's so much of it that just gets nothing. And it can be extremely quality. It can be funny as hell. It could be very deep storytelling or whatever. But they're getting beaten by crappy 2-minute memes, right?
Yeah.
And so like that was really tough, and I have to give a shout out there. But that's a way to make comics, right? That's a way that you can do that. But biggest advice is if that's what you want to do, then just do it, because that's the only way it's gonna get done. You can't expect success. You gotta be learning the whole time. Be open. Don't be too rigid. Pivot with the opportunities you're given and push forward with it, because that's it. Like that's the only paths you're given. There isn't a guide. There isn't one way. Miyamoto Musashi quote: "You must understand there's more than one way up the mountain." And that's totally with any art, any kind of art form. It's just find what works for you. That'll keep you doing it, that you love and enjoy, and that'll carry you at the very least to continue your expression. At the best, it will carry you to success. It's worked for many folks, but you never know. You know?
Yeah, and I feel like that stays true across everything, man. It's like there's so many people who like I deal with it on day-to-day basis. Like people love to talk about doing something. There's a very small amount of people that like to actually do it. It's like you gotta cross the path. It's like you just have to do it. It's like we could sit and talk about it all fucking day, but it's like at the end of the day, if you're not actually doing it, then it's like what's the point? What's the point?
Yep.
So I think that's perfect. Do you want to give a last minute pitch on I mean Jack Irons? Tell people the link is in the description if anybody wants to check it out. The campaign is currently ongoing. So
yes.
Go ahead.
Time's running out on it. I would love to have you wonderful folks in chat and anybody who watches this down the line to join us in facing Galactic Armageddon. It's a tale you're not going to find anywhere else, done by storytellers that are extremely passionate about the medium and have a very unique flair and quality to their work. It's helps foster a community that I've built of wonderful independent creators, and honestly, I just would like you folks to check it out. So again, IronVerseComics.com as well. If you just want to read issue number 1, please do, and then let me know what you think. All of our social media links are on IronVerseComics.com, top right contact section. We're on basically everything. So if you have a favorite, you can get a hold of us there. And the most important thing is that you folks just read and enjoy comics and manga, because I think it is a exceedingly unique and beautiful expression of art that is very much underrated for how big it is. It's still very underrated, and I think it has nowhere to go but up, honestly.
It definitely does. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate it. Of course, this is made possible by Dollar Coins, my boy. I see him all the time. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. I mean, I feel like you're very knowledgeable in the subject, and I love hearing about it. So hopefully people will find it interesting and check out Jack Irons, because the art is incredible. It looks fantastic. So I'll definitely be supporting it. And if anybody watches this down the line or watch this right now, of course, link is in the description for all of that stuff. You can check it out there, and please do. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. We appreciate y'all. We'll see you guys later, all right?